go. So I do. All right. Jason, heads up at the end of the sermon, if you could come back and lead that first song that you led us in this morning. And I've got to ask a question. I know the phrase that Sarah said, you turn seas into highways. That's crossing the Red Sea. I know that one. Turn bones into armies. That's Elijah. So I got that one. What is the grades into gardens? Is it the garden?
Yeah, garden. I mean, the tune becomes.
If you go today, it's a garden. Yeah, okay. All right. Just curious. But that song, if you lead that at the end again for us, please, we'll wrap up with that. Well, as Pastor Laura Lee said, we are in a, let me give you greetings from Joy. She says hi, and she is, today, this morning, she's in church in Tulsa, where our youngest son has just been elected the pastor this month. So she is there at that church with him. Yeah, so she's going to be and then when church is over, she's driving to Texas to be with our youngest daughter, whose son is working on a dissertation, and Tyler is a PhD candidate, and he's got all the classes done, just has to write this 300 or 400 page paper. And so Joy's down to babysit the 3 girls, so that while Julie's doing piano lessons during the week, he doesn't have to babysit, he can go and just focus on writing that paper. So she says hi, and the weather in Missouri has been cold, but not nearly as much snow as we're getting here, so she's doing good. We are in a series, as Pastor Laura Lee said, on the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. We are studying these heroes that are mentioned in this chapter, focusing on what they did by faith. And as the preaching team put this together, it was like, our church has faith. They believe God has a great future for us. They are faithful and they keep showing up. So it's not so much a matter of saying, hey, you're not doing this, we need you to do this. It's to say, hey, you're being just like these people. These people had faith and you're having faith. You are exhibiting faith. And we just want to come along with this series and encourage you. We want to be an Aaron and a Hur to you and lift up your hands and say, keep going. Keep fighting the battle. Keep believing God for new venues, for new space, for new workers, for new team members. Keep doing it. Keep believing God. And so our story today brings us to a man by the name of Moses. And this chapter that Jenny just read, this portion, it actually has an extra verse in front of it and an extra verse behind it, all talking about Moses. But I've dropped off the first verse because it says that his parents did something by faith. By faith, Moses' parents. So it mentions his name, but it's really his parents having faith. Then the very last verse of this section has the children of Israel by faith walking through under Moses' leadership. So he's involved in that, but it's really focusing on the faith of the people. to look at that dry ground and those 2 walls of water, and to step out and walk right into the middle of that. So it does, the first verse and the last verse I'm leaving out, that leaves us the meat of the sandwich, and that's Moses' actions of faith. And there are 3 of them. There are 3 times in these 4 verses where it says, or 5 verses, where Moses by faith did something. Moses by faith did something. Moses by faith did something. So I want us together to just verse by verse, phrase by phrase, go through these 5 verses and look at the 3 things he did and what the Bible tells us about these. Now, I have to admit that this sermon did a job on me, this sermon preparation, because I just jumped into it. I have a curious mind, and I read, trying to figure out, listen to what it's actually saying, and I just kept... I'm not mad at Moses. I don't have a vendetta at Moses, but my mindset just was, well, yeah, but. Well, yeah, but. Well, yeah, but. And so I'll share some of those with you, but here in just the last couple of days, it's like, no, these are amazing statements. These are fantastic steps of faith. And so I want us to come away from this message with that goal in mind. So while I'll point out some other things, it's just a matter of get the reality of what really Moses did, that he, by faith, did 3 amazing things in his life. All right? So we'll have a little fun today. She talked about inspiring your faith or whatever. Today we're also looking to tickle your funny bone. So we'll try to move you in a lot of different ways today. But Hebrews chapter 11, we'll start right there with verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, let's just stop right there. Moses, when he grew up, okay, we know the rest of the verse, he's going to choose to identify with the children of Israel and choose to turn his back on Egypt. But when did he do that? He did it when he grew up. When did he grow up? When did he come of age?
12.
Age 20? Age 12? Well, when does he choose to identify with Israel, not Pharaoh? That's when he grew up. Age 40.
They could have a whole other sermon.
At age 40, he decides, when he sees the Egyptian slave master hitting the Jewish slave, then he steps up and says, enough's enough. And he kills the slave master. What did he do for the first 40 years?
Nothing.
He identified with Pharaoh. He hung out in the palace. He hung out and enjoyed the riches. So he's going to make a decision. But I want you to realize here that it is a decision that at least 40 years. Now, how about the next 40 years? Where is he the next 40 years?
In the desert.
In the wilderness. He has rejected Pharaoh and all the palace. But has he identified with Israel? Is he hanging out with them? Is he suffering what they're suffering? All right. For all of you who think you're old, Moses grows up when he turns 80. Okay? At 40, he rejects Pharaoh. At 80, he accepts Israel. Wow. So, what's that mean when Moses came of age? Well, first 40 years, he didn't reject Pharaoh. He enjoyed the education. He enjoyed the housing. He enjoyed the privilege. He enjoyed the clothes. He enjoyed the chariots. For the first 40 years, he was living in Pharaoh's daughter's house. But when he comes of age, now, I'll say this. In the first 40 years, there was one day where he rejected Israel, rejected Pharaoh. And at the age of 80, there's a day where he accepts Israel. So he kind of does half of this in one phase and the other half at another phase in his life. So, what happens when he becomes of age? Still verse 24. Refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, here was my sarcasm. I wasn't being sarcastic. It was just hitting me this, and it was the thoughts that were coming in. Oh, that sounds like a bit of a distance removal. He wasn't called Pharaoh's son. Who was he called? Pharaoh's daughter's son. He was called Pharaoh's daughter's son, not Pharaoh's son. So it's like, oh, okay, well, he wasn't as privileged as I thought he was. And then I thought through that, and it's like, well, then now what's that make him to Pharaoh?
Grandson.
Grandson! He gets everything! Right? You've had grandparents, they give you everything. I thought that was, poor guy, he's Pharaoh's daughter's son. He's not Pharaoh's, but he's Pharaoh's grandson. He was privileged. He had a lot. Now, I just want you to realize this, that when Moses is making this decision, these are not hypothetical decisions. Such as if I were to ask you, would you prefer $1 million or $1 million house? Right? That's hypothetical. I'm not giving you either. Right? So you
Oh,
can
man.
say, I like this instead of that. I used to play that game with the kids when it was time for a restaurant choice. I just give them a lot of choice. Okay, Burger King or McDonald's? This, okay. KFC or Taco Bell? Okay. And then when I get the winner, it's just like the football playoffs. Then I narrow it down, okay? KFC or Burger King, all right? And then we come up with a decision. Now, those are real decisions. I can afford McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. I cannot afford $1 million. I cannot afford Pharaoh's house and his wealth, but Moses could. These were not hypothetical decisions. This is not choosing between Olive Garden and Red Lobster. This is the kingdom versus slavery. And he had his hand on both. He had his opportunity to put his hand on the palace or to put his hand on slavery. Those were real choices. He was in the palace for 40 years. He could have kept his hand on that and not. This is not hypothetical for him like it is for you. You and I read that and go, oh, I would have chosen that. But yeah, you didn't live in the palace.
Right.
He's living in the palace. People bow when he walks by. So by faith, Moses, when he comes of age, refuses to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. So by age 80, he is clearly doing both sides of the decision. At 40, he decided to turn his back on Pharaoh and the palace. At age 80, he decides, I'm going to identify with Israel. And he comes to their side, becomes their spokesperson, becomes their leader. Now, I want to concentrate on this next phrase too, because it says the passing pleasures of sin. What do you have? The fleeting, the passing, fleeting. Okay, so for us looking at this, for God looking at this, the riches of Pharaoh's household is just a passing pleasure, a fleeting. And we can see that from our perspective. You know, for 120 years you could have had that, but now you get this fame and this responsibility of leading the people to the promised land. It so outweighs what that passing pleasure could be. So for you and me and for God, a passing pleasure is simply 120 years of earthly pleasure that he gave up for the greater eternal reward. But for Moses, how long is that passing pleasure? His entire life. You and me, it's just passing, but for him, it's an entire life of living in Pharaoh's palace or not living in Pharaoh's palace. I want you to catch this, okay? Yes, we're looking back 2,800 years saying, oh, yeah, but just for 120 years he gave that up. But for Moses, he's given up a lifetime of pleasure and riches and abundance. Looking back 2,000 years from now, this life is going to seem fleeting. But right now, in the midst of living it, it's everything. If you choose to give up some sacrificial pleasure for the privilege of serving God and being faithful to him, that is a bigger decision than looking back 2,000 years from now and saying it. It is your life. Not pursuing this job, but pursuing this ministry. That's a big decision because that's your entire life. When Moses chooses to give up the palace, for him it is a lifetime decision. The one life that he will have on this earth will be forever marked by this decision that he makes. And he chooses to give up that life, his entire lifetime of enjoying. I will not live this life with the pleasures and the ease of the palace. So while we say it's a passing pleasure, from Moses' perspective, it's a lifetime. My lifetime is passing. Okay, for you, maybe, in 1,000 years, for me, maybe, but right now, it's everything. The passing pleasures for a lifetime. So Moses, by faith, is able, even though he did it part at 40 and part at 80, to look at the palace and all that comes with that, the fame, the pleasure, the money, to look at the children of Israel with their bondage and their labor and their depravity and say, but they're the chosen of God. God has a better plan for them than he has for Pharaoh. And even though I got my hands, I can grab either one, I'm going to reach out and identify. I'm going to refuse the palace, and I'm going to identify with the children of Israel. When you really think about that, that's amazing. That takes faith to lay your life on that gamble. To take all that you're going to experience as you walk the face of the earth and put it in the hands of that decision that I follow Jesus Christ. That I follow his way. Even though it means sacrifice, even though it means hardship, it will pay off. Now that's really what the second point is about. And I kind of put this 26 and 27 together. 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. So by faith, I'm going to go with the punishment. I'm going to give up the reward. By faith, I'm going to go with Israel, and I'm going to turn my back on Egypt. And he does this, it says the writer of Hebrews, as if he were able to see someone who is invisible. And I think that's a key that we've got to take out of this passage today, is that the eyes of faith see the invisible. Okay? If you're standing where I'm standing, you can see it snowing. All right? Everybody turn around, look at it snowing. I can see that. Okay? By faith, I believe spring is coming.
Amen. I'm in agreement.
Okay? Can I see it? No. But I know the one who creates the seasons, and he is faithful. Right? And Moses knew God. He talked with God. He'd seen the burning bush. And even though at the moment he couldn't see God, he believed God. And he was able to make decisions based on faith, knowing that the invisible God does exist. He has made promises that he will back up, and I can stand on faith in someone who I can't even see. So the foundation of faith is that ability to look all around you at everything you can see, and say, I know something more trustworthy. I know something more eternal. I know someone more faithful than anything I can see. And that's a great statement of faith, okay? So by faith, he makes a decision to identify with Israel. By faith, he believes in someone he can't even see, and he moves towards that decision based on that faith. Now, the third one is a little more obscure. This one kind of threw me for a loop here, but in verse 28, by faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. Okay? By faith he kept the Passover. By faith he kept the Passover. Where's the faith in that? What's amazing about keeping the Passover? Well, number one, you've got to believe that something called a death angel is going to go through the camp. Has a death angel ever gone through the camp? No. Has anybody ever seen the death angel? Not that we know of. So this angel is going to come through the land of Egypt tonight, and he is going to kill as a plague the firstborn of all of Egypt. Or he will also kill the firstborn of everyone in Israel unless we take some steps. So number one, I gotta believe that this amazing, never seen before event is going to happen. Yeah, he's like, well, he did see the plagues. Can I take you back to that for just a second? My Bible reading through the year, reading the Bible through this year has me in Exodus. So I've been studying Moses for the sermon, and in my personal devotions, reading Exodus and reading these stories. And while Moses and Aaron performed some miracles, the Egyptian magicians befuddled me. Okay? This isn't one of the plagues, but remember the rod turning into a snake? So Moses and Aaron come into Pharaoh and said, let my people go. Why should I do that? See this stick? He throws it down and it becomes a snake. Pharaoh turns to the magicians and says, what do you think? And I don't know how many magicians it is. Let's pick a number. How many magicians do you think Pharaoh had? 5, 2, 100? What? Okay. So let's just say he has several magicians, and when he turns it to them to handle the situation, you know what they do? They take their sticks and throw them down and turn them into snakes. So if he has 2 magicians, now instead of 1 viper before my throne, I have 3 vipers before my throne. I'm Pharaoh. I'm immediately looking at the magicians and going, really? That's the way you're going to do this? 1 snake was too many, and now I got 3 snakes here? Is that the way we're going to play this? And then the plagues happen. And the first plague was turning the water into blood. And Moses holds the staff out over the river. It turns to blood. The water turns to blood. And Pharaoh calls the magicians in, and they go, we can do that. And they turn the remaining water into blood. And if I'm Pharaoh, I'm like, really?
No, we got no water.
Now I got nothing. These magicians just befuddled me. And then the next plague, you know what it was? It was frogs. So Aaron holds out the rod, and frogs fill the land, and the magicians create more frogs. Now if I'm Pharaoh, I'm like, don't do that again. Do not do that. The 3rd plague comes along. From the 3rd one on, they never asked the magicians to handle it. Okay? So the blood, the frogs, the snakes, and you got 3 strikes, you're out. Forget it. I'll handle this on my own. So after that 3rd plague of the frog, or the 2nd plague of the frogs, they don't ask the magicians to show up and do anything else. Lice? No. Okay? Locusts? No. Hail? No. Don't. So Moses has seen those. He saw the snake. He saw the 9 plagues. He's never seen a death angel. The other thing that I think by faith is that, number 1, the death angel is going to come by. Number 2, that the people of Israel are going to believe that blood on the doorpost is going to save them. Hey, there's this evil dark angel that's going to come through, and he's going to kill the firstborn. But if you put blood on the doorpost, you're safe. Okay? You and I know the story, so we know how it turns out. So we got no problem with faith. But we don't know how it turns out if you're Moses. Oh, Lord, I hope this is right. I hope that angel, he's coming through at dark. You ever trying to find an address at dark?
Oh, man.
Okay. Oh, the address was right there above the door. Oh, you didn't see the blood? It was midnight. No, I didn't see the blood. So number 1, that they're going to put the blood on the door, and that the angel's going to see it, and that there will be an angel, and the children of Israel will be safe when the angel sees the blood. And then here's the next thing you got to believe. 600,000 men, so probably 600,000 households, and when the men went home to tell their family what they're going to do, all the wives went along with it. 100%. Hey, honey. Moses has this plan, and all we have to do is kill a lamb and put some of the blood on the doorpost of our house. And he had to believe that not one person would not cooperate. Not one family out of 600,000 families would find fault with that idea that they would follow through. By faith, Moses celebrated the Passover and sat in his tent behind that blood-stained doorpost, listening to the cries throughout Egypt and believing that every household in Israel was in their tent, safe and rejoicing. And not knowing till he left the tent the next morning that his faith had been rewarded, that the death angel had come, and every house with blood on the doorpost experienced no loss, and that the children of Israel were free and they were safe. These are amazing decisions. We read Hebrews 11, we read Moses' story, but I want you to come again to the reality that this is an amazing events that are happening in his life, and he is by faith moving into them. By faith, I can choose Pharaoh or I can choose Israel. I choose Israel. By faith, I can choose persecution and suffering, or I can choose the palace. By faith, I believe God is going to deliver the children of Israel and keep us safe through this whole journey and process. By faith, Moses did. Now, what's the application to you and to me? What are you doing by faith? What are you rejecting? What are you holding on to? What are you believing, even though you may have to lay down a lifetime of believing it before you see it? What does the world count as a passing pleasure? And you are struggling to let go of because it's a lifetime decision when you do. Those are the challenges that Moses' story brings to us. Some of you are making that decision in your family. Some of you are serving God and the rest of your family is not. And they are poking the jabs, and they're not inviting you to this, and they're not inviting you to that, and they're making the little jokes about it. And you keep choosing the invisible, eternal reward. And you wish it would stop, but it doesn't, and it keeps going. And within your family, you're walking the faith of Moses out on a day-by-day basis. Hang in there. With Moses as our witness, it will pay off, and you will receive the reward for that. Now, we're kind of walking by faith as a church, aren't we? Okay? You look at some of those pictures of Chuck in the early days, and it's like, how did they walk by faith? Meeting at a YMCA, setting up, tearing down, never thinking in their mind's eye they could see this, and today they're seeing it. Today we're walking by faith. We are believing God for a new venue, a larger children's area, and it has been a walk. Okay? But nobody's getting discouraged. Everybody knows it's happening. Everybody just keeps walking and praying and believing that in God's timing, we will see the reality of the expanded facilities that will allow the expanded ministry. We thank God for what we have, but we believe by faith that there is more in store for us. We walk by faith. And all of us are walking by faith when it comes to our eternal relationship with Jesus Christ. He's invisible. We haven't seen him. And yet our heart tells us he is real. We have made some sacrifices at work, in our families, at our schools. We have made sacrifices because as a Christian, I can't choose that. I choose Christ. For some of you, that's been a year or two. For some of you, that's been decades. But you're here today, walking by faith, choosing God and rejecting Pharaoh, rejecting the fleeting pleasures of this world for a much higher reward. In Jesus' name. Jason, would you come please and lead us in that opening chorus that you did? There is nothing like you, Jesus. And we close with that statement of faith. When he's done, Pastor Worley, you can come.